Dan Illman and Mike Beer are taking a look back at the Grade 2 City of Hope Mile at Santa Anita for this edition of Breeders' Cup Prep Recap. This is going to be a prep for the Breeders' Cup Mile, and Johannes has pretty much established himself as undoubtedly the best middle distance turf horse in Southern California and one of the top 3 or 4 in the entire country. Let's watch the City of Hope Mile. Johannes breaks from post position 2. He is number 3, and as usual, settles into a very good rhythm and gets good trips in his races.
Yeah, all of his races, he gets good trips. That's, listen, it's a benefit to him. His counterpart that we talked about earlier, Dan Carl Spackler on the East Coast, is very similar. These two horses are very similar. They run similar figures. They always get good trips in their races. And you know what? At the end of the day, the most important part, they're both talented. They're both really good.
Very, very good is Johannes, who sits a nice loose pocket here as Conclude blasts out to the early lead. And Conclude is a horse that is pretty quick, and he is able to carve out solid fractions, 23, 46, and 1. He's loose in here. He's just not as good right now as Johannes.
No, he's not. Yeah, he had the outside poster, but he had an easy time clearing the lead in this race. And yeah, he's not walking, Dan, but he's not flying up the backstretch, and he's loose on the lead, in control of this pace. Johannes will come for him. He'll move up the rail around this final turn to get himself into position. He will come for this horse at the top of the stretch. To the credit of Conclude, he fights really hard down past the 8th pole.
He tries hard as he does in all of his races, but right now Johannes is just really cruising along and is now starting his charge after the leader, is going to get to the outside, and this is the winning move right there, and that he was able to get out without any sort of issue and goes right by the leaders. Now the closers are going to try to make an impact, and there's going to be a blanket finish for the place, but Johannes finally puts Conclude away right there. Trickery, the 3-year-old, taking on older horses, he did pretty well for himself. He never looked like a winner, but he hung in there for 4th.
Yeah, he was very, very game in the race, to be sure. All in all, I just thought he got a pretty good trip in the race. He, was out finished from behind in the late stages, which I didn't love there. But he did hold on for 4th. He's a 3-year-old. He's got plenty of upside. He's a really, really nice horse. This just happened to be a little bit too tough for him, it seemed like.
Easter earlier in the year seemed like he was at the top of the class of the Southern California middle distance turf runners. He didn't break very well in this race. He usually doesn't have speed anyway, so I don't think it hurt him that much. He came with his usual kick. He just hasn't shown the same pop that he did over the winter and into the spring.
Yeah, it hasn't really gone on. These races are always a little tough for him anyway, Dan, when they start running him in the major grade 1 races. Breaking slowly and getting outrun early, that certainly didn't help him in here. After that, I thought his rider did everything right, got to save a ton of ground. This horse was running at the end. It was way too late.
Du Jour occasionally pops a big race and a big number for Bob Baffert out in Southern California, but his last 2 races have now kind of lacked the kind of verve I've expected from him. He ran in the Breeders' Cup Mile last year. It didn't go very well. I would assume he's questionable for this year.
Yeah, I'm assuming that if Baffert wanted to run him back in the Breeders' Cup this year, that he would have wanted him to run a little better in this race than he did. I don't know what kind of excuse they'll come out of this thing with, but he got a great trip sitting on the rail with no traffic the entire trip, Dan, and he just basically had nothing through the stretch.
Let's talk about the runner-up, Almendares for Flavien Prat and Phil D'Amato, a horse that settled near the back again. He at least came with a good, strong run. Now, I've watched this horse several times. I kind of know what he is. I'm not sure if there's a ton of upside here, and I just think Johannes is better than he is, but he ran one of his better races here.
Yeah, I guess the argument for him would be that he's in the best form of his life right now, Dan, as they reach the end of his 4-year-old campaign. He had earned a triple-digit buyer when he just missed in the Del Mar Mile at the end of August. I don't know, man. I didn't think he had, some kind of super tough trip in here. I thought everything really worked out. And to me, he just didn't really, finish super strongly in this race because it did feel like he had a shot at it. And to me, he just wasn't good enough.
Let's take a closer look at Johannes. He is a homebred son of Nyquist, who, of course, is also the sire of Immersive, the undefeated 2-year-old filly, might be the favorite in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. Johannes has won 7 of 11 starts, and he's unbeaten in turf in Southern California. He's won 7 of 8 on the grass. The only loss came when they shipped him to Churchill Downs, and perhaps he caught a softer than what he usually likes, which is the true firm turf courses you get out in Southern California. Listen, he's earned 3 consecutive triple-digit buyers. He's a win machine. He has excellent tactical speed, and he might actually be a really good price in the Breeders' Cup Mile against good competition.
Yeah, we'll see what Europeans come over. But you're right. There's a chance he gets a little bit overlooked in that race anyway. And you mentioned, that he's 7 for 8 now on the grass in his career. The loss at Churchill Downs, He had a terrible trip in that race and ran great. This horse could easily be undefeated on the grass right now. He's really, really good.
Johannes could be a sleeper in the Breeders' Cup Mile. We take a look at the payouts. He was the favorite, no surprise. 360 for Tim Yakteen. D'Amato runners complete the exactant try with Almendares, and the game speedster conclude. We'll see if Johannes can take the necessary step up against international competition in the Breeders' Cup Mile.